If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. It's a phrase that gets thrown around constantly, usually as a throwaway line, but when you start pulling on it and asking what it really means, you end up somewhere far more uncomfortable than most people expect. A simple question like, "How does WhatsApp make money?" turns into a story about power, data, privacy, and the quiet trade-offs billions of people have made without ever really being asked. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to 2009. The iPhone has only been around for a couple of years, smartphone apps are still a novelty, and Facebook is rapidly gaining momentum. Around this time, a software engineer named Brian Acton applies for a job at Facebook. He doesn't get it. After the rejection, he posts that he's looking forward to life's next adventure. That next adventure arrives only a few months later when Brian teams up with his friend Jan Koum to build a small app of their own, one they call WhatsApp. In its earliest form, WhatsApp isn't revolutionary. It's designed as a simple status update app. But once private messaging is added, everything changes. At the time, traditional SMS texting is still expensive, especially across borders. WhatsApp offers instant global messaging for free, and people notice. Downloads explode. Word spreads. The app grows faster than anyone expected. But free apps come with an obvious problem. They still need money to survive. Typically, free applications make money in one of three ways: advertising, in-app purchases, or selling user data. WhatsApp rejected all three. The founders hated advertising and had both left Yahoo partly because of disagreements over its heavy reliance on ads. They didn't want to lock features behind payments, and selling user data was a complete non-starter. Both founders were privacy activists, and protecting user trust wasn't a marketing angle for them. It was the point. For a while, WhatsApp made no money at all. The company survived on seed funding from wealthy friends at Yahoo and by keeping costs brutally low. The team worked off cheap IKEA tables, wore blankets for warmth, and ran the company with a level of frugality that bordered on obsession. This wasn't the stereotypical Silicon Valley startup trying to scale as fast as possible. It was almost deliberately anti-Silicon Valley. Eventually, though, growth creates pressure. As more users joined and new features like image messaging were introduced, server costs rose and the team needed to grow. WhatsApp finally introduced a fee, but even then it was almost symbolic. In some countries, users paid $1 up front. In others, the app was free for a year and then cost $1 per year after that. Even that fee was rarely enforced. If users didn't pay, WhatsApp usually let them continue anyway. It functioned less like a subscription and more like a voluntary donation. Surprisingly, it worked. Enough people paid that WhatsApp could cover its costs without alienating users. But the company still wasn't particularly profitable, and in the tech world, profitability isn't always the point. What mattered was users, and WhatsApp had a lot of them. Investors started knocking. Venture capital firms offered money. WhatsApp initially resisted, worried that investors would push aggressive monetization and damage the product. But as the app continued to grow at an absurd pace, firms like Sequoia Capital offered millions while agreeing to WhatsApp's terms. No ads, no interference, no pressure to monetize. WhatsApp's strategy became clear. Instead of extracting money from users, they would invest in making the app better, attract more users, and let growth itself drive value. It was a pure network effect play. The more people used WhatsApp, the more valuable it became, which attracted more investors, which funded more growth. There was only one problem with this strategy. Investors eventually want returns. And unless a company plans to become profitable, the only exit left is acquisition. In 2014, Facebook announced it was buying WhatsApp for $19 billion. The number stunned people. In the 9 months prior to the acquisition, WhatsApp had reportedly generated around $1.2 million in revenue. It was likely losing money. Facebook had already bought Instagram for $1 billion. For comparison, $19 billion could fund dozens of space missions or build multiple skyscrapers. Instead, Facebook spent it on a messaging app with similar features to its own. Mark Zuckerberg defended the price by pointing to scale. There are very few services in the world that reach 1 billion people, and WhatsApp was on that trajectory. Strategic value, he argued, mattered more than short-term revenue. But for many observers, alarm bells went off immediately. Facebook's business model is built on data collection and advertising. WhatsApp was founded on rejecting both. Zuckerberg promised the founders that WhatsApp would remain independent, that there would be no pressure to monetize, and that user privacy would be respected. For a while, it seemed believable. In 2016, WhatsApp even removed its $1 subscription fee entirely. On the surface, it looked like Facebook was happy to let WhatsApp operate at a loss. In reality, the picture was much clearer. Facebook didn't buy WhatsApp for its revenue. It bought users, data, and control. WhatsApp provided access to phone numbers, contact networks, behavioral patterns, and markets where Facebook itself was weaker, particularly in developing countries. Removing the fee made adoption frictionless, accelerating WhatsApp's growth and pulling more people into Facebook's broader ecosystem. Your data was worth far more than $1 a year. Behind the scenes, cracks were already forming. In 2017, Brian Acton left WhatsApp after clashing with Facebook over monetization and data sharing. Walking away cost him an estimated $850 million in unvested stock. Shortly after, he publicly turned against Facebook, tweeting, "It's time, delete Facebook." He later invested $50 million of his own money into Signal, a non-profit messaging app designed to prioritize privacy and security, effectively trying to rebuild WhatsApp as he originally intended it to be. Jan Koum followed soon after, reportedly over pressure to weaken encryption to make monetization easier. Around the same time, regulators stepped in. The European Commission fined Facebook €110 million for misleading regulators during the WhatsApp acquisition, ruling that Facebook had falsely claimed it was technically impossible to merge WhatsApp and Facebook user data, despite evidence that it had already been happening. Today, WhatsApp technically makes money through WhatsApp Business, charging companies for certain customer interactions, and Facebook has confirmed plans to introduce ads in the status section. But these revenue streams are secondary. WhatsApp's real value has always been data, integration, and scale. It's another tentacle extending Facebook's reach deeper into daily life. People continue to use WhatsApp not because they trust it, but because everyone else does. The network effect is powerful enough to override concern. You're forced to choose between privacy and participation. And that's the real story here. WhatsApp isn't uniquely evil. Data collection is standard practice across the internet. Free services are funded somehow. The uncomfortable truth is that most of us have decided convenience is worth the trade. We give up pieces of ourselves in exchange for frictionless connection, and most days, that feels like a fair deal. But it's still a deal. And if you don't understand what you're paying with, you probably should. Because if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. What makes this entire story unsettling is not that WhatsApp exists, or that Facebook bought it, or even that data is being collected. What makes it unsettling is how normal all of this has become, how quietly the rules were rewritten while everyone was distracted by convenience. Over time, the question stopped being whether WhatsApp was private and became whether privacy itself was still realistic in a world built on connection at scale. Because when billions of people depend on a single tool to communicate, that tool stops being just an app and starts becoming infrastructure. WhatsApp's encryption has long been marketed as its strongest defense, the promise that messages are end-to-end encrypted and therefore unreadable to anyone except the sender and the recipient. On paper, that sounds airtight. In practice, it is far more nuanced. Encryption protects message content in transit, but it does not eliminate metadata. Who you talk to, when you talk, how often, where you are, what device you use, how long conversations last, and how frequently you interact with certain contacts all remain visible. For an advertising-driven company, that behavioral data is often more valuable than the words themselves. Patterns reveal intent. Intent sells products. This is why claims that they don't read your messages miss the point entirely. You don't need to read someone's conversations to understand them. If you know who they speak to every day, what time they wake up, where they travel, which businesses they interact with, and how their habits change over time, you can build a psychological profile that is frighteningly accurate. Academic research has shown that metadata alone can predict political affiliation, relationship status, religious beliefs, and emotional state with alarming reliability. The content becomes almost irrelevant. As Facebook continued integrating its services, concerns grew that WhatsApp was becoming less a standalone product and more a sensor feeding into a larger system. Instagram, Facebook, Messenger, and WhatsApp increasingly felt less like separate platforms and more like different doors leading into the same building. Each app collected different fragments of identity, and together they formed something far more complete. The power of that consolidation is difficult to overstate. No government census, no private database, no intelligence agency has ever had access to a behavioral map of humanity on this scale. Public trust eroded slowly, then suddenly. Apple's 2021 privacy disclosures forced WhatsApp to publicly list what data it collected and shared. Seeing it laid out in plain language was a shock for many users, not because the practices were new, but because they were finally visible. Phone numbers, contacts, identifiers, transaction data, location signals, usage diagnostics. WhatsApp insisted nothing had changed. This was simply clarification. That explanation, if anything, made it worse. It implied that users had unknowingly agreed to this reality years earlier. The backlash was immediate. Millions searched for alternatives. Signal and Telegram surged in downloads overnight. Yet even here, the story wasn't simple. Telegram, despite its popularity, does not enable end-to-end encryption by default. Signal does, but adoption remains limited by the same force that made WhatsApp powerful in the first place. Networks resist fragmentation. People don't migrate in isolation. They move in groups, or not at all. This creates a quiet kind of lock-in, not enforced by contracts or fees, but by social gravity. Your workplace uses WhatsApp. Your family uses WhatsApp. Your friends use WhatsApp. Leaving it feels less like deleting an app and more like opting out of social life. That pressure is subtle, but it is real, and it explains why most people continue using services they openly say they do not trust. Even the founders understood this too late. Brian Acton has openly admitted that selling WhatsApp compromised his values, that the deal traded long-term privacy for short-term scale. That admission matters because it reframes the narrative. This was not a story of villains and heroes. It was a story of incentives. Facebook did what Facebook was built to do. WhatsApp grew faster than its ideals could protect it. And users accepted the trade because the product worked. There is a temptation to frame this as a warning, a call to abandon WhatsApp entirely, but that misses the deeper issue. WhatsApp is not an exception. It is the blueprint. Free platforms grow by minimizing friction. Minimizing friction requires data. Data creates power. Power attracts capital. Capital demands growth. Growth demands compromise. The cycle is not broken by good intentions alone. The more honest question is not whether WhatsApp should exist, but whether users understand the price of participation. Convenience has become so cheap that we forget it is being subsidized. The bill simply arrives in a form most people don't recognize. It arrives as targeted influence instead of invoices, as algorithmic nudges instead of receipts. And because the cost is abstract, it is easy to ignore. To be clear, this is not an argument that data collection is inherently evil. Many free services exist only because advertising exists. Much of the internet would collapse without it. The problem is asymmetry. Companies know everything about users. Users know almost nothing about how they are profiled, ranked, and influenced. That imbalance is where harm emerges, not from technology itself, but from opacity. WhatsApp still connects families across borders, supports small businesses, and enables communication in places where alternatives are unreliable or unaffordable. That value is real. The danger lies in pretending that value comes without consequence. Every message sent, every contact synced, every habit logged feeds a system optimized not for connection, but for engagement and monetization at scale. So the question circles back to where it began. How does WhatsApp make money? The answer is not simple, because money is no longer the point. Influence is. Data is. Control over attention is. WhatsApp doesn't need to be profitable on its own if it strengthens the ecosystem that is. Its role is strategic, not standalone. Whether that trade-off is acceptable is not a decision anyone else can make for you, but it should be a conscious one. Because in a world where the most powerful products are free, the most expensive thing you can give away is yourself. And once you understand that, you start seeing every free platform differently. The script explores how WhatsApp evolved from a simple, privacy-focused messaging app into a critical piece of Facebook's global data ecosystem. It begins by tracing WhatsApp's origins with Brian Acton and Jan Koum, emphasizing their rejection of advertising, user data sales, and aggressive monetization in favor of building a high-quality product that prioritized privacy and user experience. Early growth was driven by the high cost of SMS and WhatsApp's free global messaging model, supported briefly by a small subscription fee and investor funding rather than profit. As WhatsApp's user base exploded, the script explains how its value shifted from revenue generation to strategic importance. Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp for $19 billion is framed not as a purchase of a messaging app, but as a purchase of users, behavioral data, and network dominance. The story highlights how Facebook's advertising-driven business model clashed with WhatsApp's original ideals, leading to internal conflicts, the departure of both founders, and growing concerns over data sharing and privacy despite public assurances of independence and encryption. The second half focuses on how data collection works in practice, arguing that metadata and behavioral patterns can be more revealing than message content itself. It examines public backlash, regulatory fines, and changing privacy disclosures, while explaining why most users continue to rely on WhatsApp despite distrust due to network effects and social dependency. The script concludes by reframing the central idea. WhatsApp's true value lies not in direct profits, but in influence, data aggregation, and control over attention within a larger ecosystem. Ultimately, it challenges viewers to recognize that free services are subsidized by personal data, and that convenience often comes at the cost of privacy, whether users consciously accept that trade or not.